What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and the iPhone 7 Plus was, and still is to this day, one of the best bargains you can get on an iPhone. And even though it'll be 4 years old in September of 2020, it still performs exceptionally well. So in this video, I wanted to revisit the iPhone 7 Plus and let you guys know basically how it's been holding up for me over time and if I still recommend keeping this one into the new decade. So let's pick up where we left off. So last year I made a video titled why the iPhone 7 Plus is the best iPhone to buy in 2019. And in that video, the main reason for it being the best one to buy was because it performed exceptionally well and it could also be purchased used on eBay for an insanely low price. And remember, this was shortly after the iPhone XS, XS Max, and the iPhone XR were released. But now in 2020, is the iPhone 7 Plus still a great phone with price considered? And even if it is, should you buy or keep the iPhone 7 Plus, or should you sell it and buy a newer iPhone? So I'm gonna try to answer all of those questions in this video. So first off, the iPhone 7 Plus does still have that old iPhone look to it. You know, it has the big bezels up top and around the edges and on the bottom. And we do also have that home button. So it's definitely an old looking device in today's standards. But it was also the very first iPhone to ship without a headphone jack. So it was a revolutionary iPhone just for that point alone. It was also the only iPhone to ever be sold in this beautiful matte black colorway right here. So the iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max have a somewhat similar like matte backing, but it's not quite the same as the iPhone 7 Plus was in this specific black color. Although it was controversial at launch, the removal of the headphone jack wasn't and still isn't a big deal to me at all. And I'd imagine that most of you guys feel the exact same way, since you likely have wireless headphones or AirPods to use with your phone. But the thing that was a big deal to me was the introduction of dual cameras. And of course, the iPhone 7 Plus was the first iPhone to ever have a dual camera setup, and man, did this camera impress. So we have a dual 12 megapixel lens setup here, with one being a wide angle lens and another being the telephoto lens. And we do also have quad LED True Tone flash, HDR support, portrait mode, and we can also shoot video in 4K. And now, 4 years later, the iPhone 7 Plus camera is actually still pretty good. Regular shots and portrait shots turn out pretty well, while selfies and videos are both okay. They're decent. They're not anything great, not anything to write home about, but they're still not bad. And the reason I say that the video taking capability is just decent on the iPhone 7 Plus is because it can only shoot in 4K 30 and not 4K 60. Now, if you don't care about that or even know what the difference in the two is, then you'll be happy with how your videos turn out, because they're not bad quality or anything like that. It's just that I'm used to shooting in 4K 60 when I want to shoot something, you know, in really good quality, and you don't have that option here with the iPhone 7 Plus. But again, it's probably not going to be a deal breaker to you. It's probably not going to be a big deal to the majority of people. But I did want to mention it because this was the last iPhone to be restricted to just 4K 30, because the iPhone 8 Plus the year later did introduce 4K 60 into the video camera. Now, sure, if you compare this camera to the camera on like the iPhone XR, the iPhone XS, or the iPhone 11, obviously the camera quality, the pictures and the videos aren't going to look as good on the iPhone 7 Plus. But the reality is you don't need great. Most of you guys that are looking to buy an iPhone 7 Plus, you're not buying it for amazing video quality or amazing picture quality. So that's why I think that 99% of the people that have an iPhone 7 Plus or are wanting to get an iPhone 7 Plus will be perfectly fine with the quality output of both photos and videos. And speaking of firsts for the iPhone 7 Plus, this was also the first iPhone to drop the mechanical home button in favor of a new pressure sensitive home button powered by an enhanced Taptic engine. And you even have an option to set the pressure you want to put on the home button inside of settings as well. You can see there we have home button. If you tap on that, you could choose your click on a scale of 1 to 3 in terms of how much pressure to put on that new home button. And this essentially means that the home button should never break, which is nice because that's one of the major problems with buying a new iPhone 6s or an iPhone 5s, an iPhone 6, any iPhone older than the iPhone 6s, because most of them have broken or repaired home buttons. There's some kind of issue with the mechanical home button. So it's nice that you're not gonna have to worry about that when buying a used iPhone 7 Plus. And speaking of pressure sensitive, we also have 3D touch on the iPhone 7 Plus, or I guess you could say it's haptic touch now, with iOS 13, but yes, we do have a pressure sensitive screen on this guy, and there are still certain areas of iOS 13 as well where you can take advantage of actual 3D touch and not just haptic touch, which is nice to have, of course, on, such an old device. Now, of course, we cannot talk about the home button without mentioning Touch ID, which of course is everyone's favorite iPhone pastime, and even still to this day, some users' preferred method of unlocking their phone. So going back to Touch ID after going years with just using Face ID is just weird. It's fast and convenient, but I think I do still prefer Face ID over Touch ID for a bunch of different reasons. I mean, sure, you can unlock your phone without having it fully out of your pocket yet and, lined up with your face. You don't have to sit weird or anything like that. But Face ID is just more practical. It's more secure, and it's even more accurate in my usage just on a day-to-day basis. With Touch ID, you will have a hard time unlocking your phone with sweaty hands or dirty hands or with gloves on. Whereas with Face ID, I can unlock my phone in pitch black with sunglasses on, if it's snowing outside, if I'm sweaty, anything like that. But with that being said, I did find that Touch ID was more useful for Apple Pay, since I just have to use my finger, like my thumb here, instead of looking at my phone before paying at like a gas pump or in a store or anything like that. So ultimately, I do prefer Face ID. But Touch ID is, it's not bad by any means. It's just less practical in most situations compared to newer iPhones with Face ID. I just wish that Apple would introduce a phone with both Touch ID and Face ID so you could choose, so we could stop having to, talk about this so much. As for the build of the iPhone 7 Plus, it's made of 7000 series aluminum, and while it's not glass like we're used to now, it still feels like a premium phone, especially given its weight. It weighs 188 grams, which is just a little bit lighter than the iPhone 11 over here. So if you pick up an iPhone 11, the iPhone 7 Plus is a little bit lighter, but they're definitely very similar in terms of weight. And this aluminum build is also great for those of you who drop your phone a lot, because it's not glass, so it's not going to shatter or break near as easily as that glass is going to. And speaking of durability, let's discuss how well this phone has held up over the years. So of course, I have had a screen protector on here since day one, as you could probably tell in this video. It's been on here for quite a while, and I also used the case for the first year I had the phone and used it as my daily driver, but since then I've used it without a case, and the phone still looks pretty good on both the front and the back, especially for a 2016 device. Now, of course, there are some weird markings and some obvious signs of wear, but it's all rather minimal given the age of this phone and really just how much I've used it over the years. And another thing I should note is that my mom, dad, and brother are all still using the iPhone 7 Plus to this date. And while a couple of them did have to have their phones replaced, one was like a faulty camera and another one was the no service issue, so they had to be replaced for free. But none of them, aside from that, have ever had any issues with the durability of their iPhone. I've also seen some users show their iPhone 7 and 7 Plus with paint chips in it and like the paint coming off the edges, but that's not the case with mine. I don't have any kind of stripping of the paint or anything like that, and none of my family members have had that either, but I have read that that is a problem with the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. And the matte black color here is also less prone to scratches on the back, which is nice. So even if you don't use like a case and you just have a screen protector, you're still going to be pretty impressed with how well this backing avoids, scratches and nicks. It still will get scratches and nicks, but just not near as easily as something like the iPhone 8 or anything with a glass backing. It's also gonna, have a lot less fingerprints. It's not near the fingerprint magnet as those glass backing iPhones are. We also have IP67 water resistance, so that makes this even more durable when it comes to using this guy in like the pool, if you want to take it to the beach, or if you need to grab it while you're in the shower or anything like that. You don't have to worry about messing the phone up because we do have IP67 rated water resistance. The display on the iPhone 7 Plus is another area that really impresses me given the age. It has a 5.5 inch 1080 by 1920 LCD display with a pixel density of 401 pixels per inch, and it also gets pretty bright, up to 625 nits of max brightness, which is the same max brightness as the new iPhone 11. And while it's not OLED, the blacks do still look crisp, and dark mode is also available, of course, with iOS 13, which is an excellent complement to the stealthy matte black look of this iPhone 7 Plus here. You can just kind of have that dark theme going on inside and outside of the iPhone. Now, as for performance, the iPhone 7 Plus has Apple's A10 Fusion chip and shipped with iOS 10 out of the box, but of course now I'm running the latest iOS 13 software, which is iOS 13.3 at the time of recording this, and I've been satisfied with the performance overall. Even when compared to something like the iPhone 10R, the iPhone 7 Plus still holds its own. I mean, obviously the iPhone 10R is faster in a lot of ways, but the iPhone 7 Plus does hold its own. So not only do apps open up fast and stay open in the background longer, but games also play more smoothly, and we also get some great new features like dark mode. We have the new volume HUD, as you can see here on the left-hand side. We have a download manager in Safari now. We have a fully revamped look inside of the Photos application, and there are just a lot of great features included with iOS 13, and this keeps the iPhone 7 Plus feeling more like a modern phone and, makes it feel not as old as it actually is. And the great thing is the iPhone 7 Plus will likely be supported for another 2 years until iOS 15, and maybe even longer than that. We don't know for sure. So even if you bought one today, you'll get at least a couple years of software updates and new features being added. And for the price, that's a pretty good deal if you ask me. Battery life on the 7 Plus is also pretty good, but only if you've already had or plan on replacing the battery at some point down the road. Otherwise, you're gonna find yourself complaining about the battery drain pretty often. You're going to be pretty annoyed by the battery in the iPhone 7 Plus. When lithium-ion batteries just in general are constantly used and used and used, and you put hundreds of cycles on the battery, it's going to wear down, regardless of how large the battery is, what device it is, anything. That's just how lithium-ion batteries work. And of course, you can check your battery health in settings right here. If you go to settings, battery, and then battery health, you can see the maximum capacity right there, and that should indicate when you need a new battery. But of course, even if that shows a high percentage and your battery is draining like abnormally, you should take it into the Apple Store and have them replace the battery. And speaking of battery, you should definitely have optimized battery charging on if you're on iOS 13 on the iPhone 7 Plus, which I do recommend being on iOS 13, but definitely go ahead and turn that on. And you should also pay attention to these charts down here. I have not used this much in the last 24 hours, but you should pay attention to these charts down here to see where you're spending your time and what's draining your battery the most. You can also go ahead over to screen time to check that out as well, to basically see how much you're using your phone and what could be causing battery drain on your 7 Plus. Now, of course, since we have an aluminum backing on the 7 Plus here, we don't have the option to wirelessly charge, but that's likely not going to be a big deal or like a deal breaker for anybody watching this video. But I did just want to mention it because, once again, this is the last iPhone to not support wireless charging. So yeah, the iPhone 7 Plus is an all-around solid device. It isn't excellent in any area these days, at least, but it also isn't awful in any category either. It's just a solid, reliable iPhone that I think is still one of the best buys, really regardless of any year. As long as it's still being supported by software, I think it's a great buy just for a solid iPhone that doesn't really excel in any area, but is just average across the board pretty much with everything. All right, so now let's answer the questions you may be asking yourself right now. And number one is, should you keep the iPhone 7 Plus if you have one right now? And to answer that question, I say yes. You've kept it for so many years for a reason, right? I mean, sure, money plays a factor, but it's gotten the job done for you for years now. And if I were you, I would keep the 7 Plus until the new 2020 iPhones get released. And then from there, you'll have a few options to choose from. So the first option is you could either go for the rumored iPhone 9, aka the iPhone SE 2, which will be cheap and it should be released in early 2020, probably the first quarter of 2020, or you should wait until late 2020 when the new flagship iPhones are released and then pick up an iPhone XR or a discounted iPhone 11 from Apple or used on eBay if you want the best value. Now, of course, if you start saving up your money now, or if you just have a bigger budget in general, then I would go after either the flagship 2020 iPhone or a used iPhone 11 Pro Max, which I'm sure you can get a good deal on after the new ones release, especially used over on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, wherever you buy used iPhones. Now, the second question is, should you buy an iPhone 7 Plus in 2020? And to answer that question, it's going to be pretty similar to what I just said. So if you have an iPhone 6S or 6S Plus, I would wait until you see what Apple releases this year before making a decision. But if you have an iPhone 6, an iPhone 5S, or maybe even something older than the iPhone 5S, then you likely are on a very, very tight budget and probably won't be able to afford a newer iPhone. So to those of you in this situation, yes, I would recommend the iPhone 7 Plus. You can get one now for under $300 on Amazon or eBay. And the only other iPhone in that price range is the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, which isn't too much different from the 7, so I would save the money. And again, this whole video, I've been talking about the iPhone 7 Plus specifically, not the regular size iPhone 7. I do not like the iPhone 7 in 2020. I think the iPhone 7 Plus is the one to go with if you're gonna go down the iPhone 7 route. So yeah, hopefully that answered the questions you guys have. But of course, if I didn't answer your specific question in this video, leave a comment down below and I will be sure to get back to you and answer you down there in the comments section. But if you guys did enjoy this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And of course, make sure you guys do subscribe so you don't miss my next video on the iPhone 7 Plus. And of course, I'll make other videos on all other iPhones in 2020 as well. So stay tuned for all of those videos. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching and I'll see you soon.